wrote in 1776, "There is no way of influencing men so powerfully as by the means of women. These should therefore be our chief study. We should insinuate ourselves into their good opinion, give them hints of emancipation from the tyranny of public opinion, and of standing up for themselves. It will be an immense relief to their enslaved minds to be freed from any one bond of restraint, and it will fire them more and cause them to work for us with zeal, without knowing that they do so, for they will only be indulging their own desire of personal admiration." So, Sean, doesn't this remind you of Gloria Steinem and her agenda?
Yes,
But there's more. I'm going to keep going, okay?
please do.
So they advocated, these people, for the use of moral corruption through alcohol, drugs, moral corruption, and all forms of vice to be used systematically to corrupt the morals of youth. Okay. So it doesn't just, when you're young, that's when you form your beliefs. And it is by corrupting the youth, which is why music is so important, right? But this began back then in the 1700s. It moved into the United States with the founding fathers. And then what they did was they created, quote, special agents, which were trained as so-called tutors, mentors, call them what you like, in every field. Even the society ladies. So we have, let's say, somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell, right? The society lady plays a very big role to lead in the corruption, because they use the luxury goods that they wear. And we see this at, let's say, the Grammys and at Hollywood premieres, and we see this everywhere. And what does that do? It makes people who cannot afford this try to emulate. And so they remain poor, right? Because they spend whatever little earnings they have on trying to, you know, look fashionable. I mean, so like literally everything is created to just hurt us all, the populace, and keep us without really achieving any power. So one of the people that I'm going to discuss is a man by the name of William Paley. Now, he is the man who made Clive Davis, and he is an apparatus of the intelligence. He, in fact, is one of the co-founders of the three-letter agency. And Sean, can I just refer to them as three-letter agency without having to say
Yeah, those
the C
that's a
word?
you can use the C word or three-letter agency. It's fine. We're fine with all that.
I can say CIA.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so like he was the co-founder of the CIA, but he also created CBS Records and CBS Television, which in the beginning, I think everyone by now knows, in the United States, we had three television stations. We had CBS, we had NBC, and ABC. Now, even let's say, like, if you knew nothing about William Paley and the fact that he co-created CIA, you would probably know that we had the Church Committee hearings of 1975, the Pike Committee hearings also of 1975, which were both prompted by something called I forget the name of the report, but it was just shy of 700 pages that were given to Seymour Hersh, who is a journalist for the New York Times. Now, the New York Times, despite the fact that it is a newspaper created and for the other side, was basically geared toward the middle classes. And so when this report landed in Hersh's possession, and basically is shy of 700 pages of the crimes of the CIA against the populace of the United States. And he wrote about this in December of 1974. It outraged the middle classes so much that they created committees to investigate. And what came out was Sig Mickelson, who had been the president of CBS, created again by William Paley, spilled the beans. He said he had become president in 1954, and he, under oath, said, look, by the time I was president, I knew the CIA had a long-standing relationship with CBS. So the cat was out of the bag. And I'm sure, like, you'd heard of this for sure, right?
Yes, keep going.
Okay, so the report, by the way, if you guys want to look it up, it's called The Family Jewels. It's fascinating reading. I've read it. It's just shy of 700 pages. But even at these the committee thing, only about 10% of the horrible things done to the populace by CIA was really exposed. Now, William Paley is a really interesting guy. He had been in the Office of War Information during the World War situation, but he served in the psychological warfare branch. And now the Office of War Information is the predecessor of the Office of Strategic Services, which itself is the predecessor of CIA during World War II under Dwight Eisenhower. Now, he achieved the rank of colonel. Now, when I discovered this about Paley, I mean, so if I were to say to you, Colonel, and he's in psychological operations, Sean, what person pops into your mind?
The people in psychological operations from that era were incorporated from the Nazis, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah. And also, how about Colonel Michael Aquino?
Oh, yes, the old Satanic. Yes.
So it reminded me of Michael Aquino. And so clearly we have somebody else, Jimmy Iovine, right, who's the co-founder of Interscope Records. And I will be coming back, guys, to Paley, and then we're going to go into Clive Davis. There's so much to cover. Michael Aquino is connected to Jimmy Iovine. And by the way, Iovine was born March 11, 1953. He's best known as the co-founder of Interscope Records. He became the chairman and CEO of Interscope Geffen AMM, which was basically an umbrella music unit formed by Universal Music Group in 1999. Now, if you guys remember the name Rachel Chandler, she is connected to Jimmy, and we have photographs that I and many other people took off her Instagram, which is now long gone, showing her, at age 14 with well-known rappers such as Eminem and others. And do you remember the name Rachel Chandler, or does that ring bells?
Chandler rings a bell, yeah, but I can't remember the backstory.
So she was one of the girls that basically was, who came from money, who was also involved with the Epi person. However, she's also connected to Keith Rainier, the Nexium, with Brofman, and a member of Rachel's family did work alongside Iovine. And, it's just one of her friends, by the way, posted, and I'm only going to use her first name. It's a foreign name, so bear with me. Berenai, I think, is her first name. Posted a photograph of herself with her grandfather. And who is her grandfather? Michael Aquino. So you see how these people, you can't get one without the other. It's like they're all interconnected. So another of the images that she posts, I'm going to have to spell this, guys. She explains that she is a Canaibal. And there's this horrific, there's this horrific photo of her mouth with the red substance around it. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is done to debase, clearly, the population, right? And then if you look at the Interscope Records logo, and you guys can pull it up if you want while I'm talking, what does it look like? It's actually the FBI symbol for boy blank. You got that?
Label. I'm looking at it right now. Let's have a look.
So if you look at
Yep.
that, isn't that the FBI logo for boy? And so basically, I'm going to describe it. It's a small blue spiral-shaped triangle surrounded by a larger triangle, where the small triangle represents a small boy and the larger triangle represents an adult man. Now, these people, that's their logo. I mean, they
Wow.
don't worry about, it's that old saying, it's right in our faces, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the thing about Ivine is that people almost forget or are unaware that he began his, let's say, his career working with John Lennon of the Beatles, as did, by the way, Harvey Weinstein. Did that surprise you, Sean?
Well, it's hard to surprise me, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, I had been working on a series, and I had to dive into the Beatles arena, and I was like stunned when I found Harvey Weinstein with the Beatles at the age of
Oh.
16. And
Oh.
then guess what? After Weinstein comes out of this, and he's worked with them for a couple of years, that's when the reports of him, and he starts in the music industry, right? He's promoting stuff, he's in the music industry, he's before he goes into the film industry. He already has the habit of what we later learned in a 2017. So this is not like he learned it from the very wholesome that was sold to us group that we know as the Beatles. I mean, it was stunning for me to hear that. But anyway, we also know that Weinstein and Jay-Z have had a couple of collaborative efforts, do you want me to describe those?
Yes, please.
So Jay-Z and Weinstein basically collaborated a couple of times. They released a documentary on Khalif Browder, who spent 3 years waiting for trial on Rikers Island. And then before he was finally released, he unalived himself, allegedly. And then the two decided to continue on with another series of projects about Trayvon Martin, the 17-year-old teenager who was stalked and fatally shot by George Zimmerman in Florida in 2012. And so, they nabbed the rights, Weinstein and Jay-Z, to the two books about Martin. And, so they worked together before clearly Weinstein was taken away. Because, they get rid of people every now and then. They try to get rid of Clive Davis. We're going to continue. We're going to return to William Paley.
I
Now,
just want to say I watched the story of Khalif and it was really heartbreaking.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but that happens a lot, doesn't it? Where you just don't hear about it very often.
It does happen a lot, yes.
So, Samuel, who is William Paley's father, is another guy like Wexy. I'm going to call him Wexy because who came from Russia, and they came with nothing, and he turned nothing into a cigar manufacturing business, which basically by the end of the 1920s, lo and behold, he's a millionaire. However, what is omitted from the history of, let's say, William Paley and Samuel, his father, is the fact that cigars were sort of part and parcel of, let's say, the liquor industry. So when we have prohibition, which happened, the cigars, which people would be smoking at these establishments, since these establishments had to close down because of the law preventing liquor, the cigar industry suffered, but not the Paleys. So the Paley, when I study history, I'm like, oh, you know what? That name is missing from other families like the Brofmans, who made their money through the sale of liquor, the Kennedy family, and others, who basically that's where they made their bones during Prohibition. So William basically, what they did was for the family business, they started to advertise in radios. And this led to the first, like doing commercials and then buying a radio station. And then it turned into 16 stations called the Columbia Phonographic Broadcasting System. And the goal really was only to advertise the cigar business, but it quickly grew into 114 affiliate stations, at which point CBS television was born, because that was the beginning. People were beginning to have TVs in their house. It was no longer just the radio. And this guy is a psyop specialist. So he sees how he can control the masses through the use not only of music, which he then gets Clive Davis to do, but through the television shows that we saw, and reruns, and to present day, it's now going into the gaming industry. So I mean, it surprises me sometimes to think that people are unaware that the television was used as a mind control tool.
One of the viewers is asking these people, was the origin of their wealth from peddling substances?
Very likely. I mean, it's similar to how the United Kingdom created their wealth, right? Peddling substances, and that's a tried and true technique. So yes, but this happened along, when Paley went into CBS, which then had a record division, which Clive Davis would join, and we'll get to Clive soon. It happened simultaneous with the MK Ultra program, along with other programs. Now you guys can study Congress for Cultural Freedom. And that was a front that the CIA used to use, let's say, art and music and books to, again, control the mass populace around the world. And eventually they operated out of 35 countries, not just the United States, but 35 countries. Now, you may be surprised to learn that one of their books was the 1955 bestseller written by Vladimir Nabokov, titled Lolita.
Yeah.
Come on. So, like, they have an obsession with minors. And one of the people that was heading the Congress for Cultural, whatever it's called, was Nikolai Nabokov, who was Vladimir's cousin. So, and then, of course, we have that become a movie, which then is made by our favorite guy, Stanley Kubrick, who raises her age to 14. However, that book, Lolita, is Eppie's, I can't say his name. What do we say for Eppie? Jeffrey's favorite book. He had a copy in many of his rooms throughout many of his houses. So Paley also worked very closely with Rockefeller. And so I'll just mention that one of Jay-Z's earlier record companies was named Rockefeller. This is not a coincidence. Nelson Rockefeller was one of the wealthy men in the United States, and the CIA used wealthy men as vehicles to funnel money into the arts. So the Rockefeller money was funneled into Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was founded in 1950, and it was outed in 1966, by the historian Francis Stoner Saunders, who basically outed them and said they struggled for control of the mind. That can't be any clearer, So MK Ultra, where it's alive and well. So Rockefeller was also the president of his mother's museum. The Mother's Museum is the Modern Museum of Art, MoMA. And if that name is familiar, it is because it should remind you of Leon Black CEO of Apollo, who was the second largest financial, I'm going to call it funnel, to Jeff after Wexy, and who sat on the board until he received so much heat from all of us, thank goodness, that he stepped down from the board. But what does that tell us? It tells us that MoMA is a cutout as well.
But didn't Jeffrey do all those financial services for him and earn that money legitimately?
Oh, come on.
Can you remind the viewers how much that was?
I think it was in the neighborhood of $158 million given to Jeff out of the kindness of his heart.
And you just hand that much over, don't you, for financial services?
Yeah, because, but Leon Black's father, Eli, who I've written a lot about, was the head of United Fruit. And he found himself flying out of the window of the 44th floor of the Pan Am building in New York in I believe it was 1975. And who was the attorney for United Fruit? It was Alan Dulles. So the whole thing, you see how it's like one, and it doesn't matter. I mean, Leon's fine. They unalived his father. He's still, let's call it, allegedly, in my opinion, from what I see and from what I know, because Leon was a friend of my abuser, I'm going to call him an intelligence asset. Is that okay?
Yeah, let me just read this. I've got it off Google. Leon Black paid Jeffrey $158 million between 2012 and 2017 for tax and estate planning service.
And people bought that.
I was supposed to believe that. Oh my goodness.
But how many people, and that's all you get from mainstream, that they will repeat that ad nauseum, and they will also say, and I particularly dislike when indie people like you and I, well, they can't be like you and I because you and I are truthers, but indie people say, oh, Leslie Wexner he was a blackmail victim. No, he wasn't. Like, I know this firsthand. No, he wasn't.
It says Leon Black, the co-founder of Apollo Global Management, also settled a lawsuit with the U.S. Virgin Islands for $62.5 million to avoid potential lawsuits. Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, but that's all he was, right? Just tax advice, sure. But you see, if we trace, it's not easy. It's not difficult, guys, to figure out how to play this chessboard thing that we're looking at. If you study history and you see the role of Rockefeller, and then you see somebody like Leon Black or Leslie Wexner connected to, let's say, Jeff was outed. Wasn't he outed by Alexander Acosta, who said, I was told to back off, that he was, belonged to
above
intelligence?
His pay grade. Yeah, above his pay grade.
So, you look at the people around him or anyone in the future, because this will happen again, I assure you, and see who's connected to whom, and then use the Rockefeller sort of like that playbook, and look at these people differently, and then see what else they've done, and that will give you the stones to start connecting these dots easily without you depending on mainstream. Will never tell you, so you have to figure it out either by listening to Sean or me or other people like us. But anyway, Clive Davis, we're getting to him, born on April 4th, 1932. He was actually the protege of Meyer Lansky. And by the way, I live on the Upper West Side of New York City, and I live very close to a place that both Wexy and Clive Davis keep an apartment at. And that is, they keep an apartment at 15 Central Park West. It is on 59th Street. And so we have Wexy, who purchased an apartment there many years ago for his mother-in-law. And then we have Clive Davis, who loves that apartment. It's got, and you know why they love it, Sean?
Why?
I didn't send you a picture, but I will. Not now because I don't know how to do two things at once here. But because, like, there are some buildings that have an inner courtyard that you don't have to like get out of your car on the street. It has an inner courtyard so the car can kind of pull in and nobody sees you. And so it offers them that privacy. But to think that Wexner and Clive Davis have an apartment in the same building is really, and it's walking distance to Jay-Z has an apartment on 57th Street. And I wasn't going to share this, but should I?
Yes, please do.
Well, this is not even anything I shared with anybody yet, but so you guys are the first to hear. There's a man by the name of Bernie Kornfeld who helped Hugh Hefner with the tunnels under the Hefner Mansion in California. Bernie Kornfeld had also a group of very young girls as his, let's call it harem, but these were very young girls. There are photographs you can probably pull up. When Jay-Z was arrested for that stabbing incident that I'm not going to go into, there was a mugshot taken of him, and it showed the address of 152 West 57th Street. I happen to know from other sources that I will not reveal that that building does not only have family members of Bernie Kornfeld who helped Hefner and other things with the tunnels that in fact reach into other properties, right? So that, and the only way you can have access to a property in that building is to be an insider. So Jay-Z is frankly above many people to have been allowed that. That said, having these apartments like Clive Davis having one on 59th Street, it's walking distance to many places. Let's say walking distance to Trump Tower, walking distance to many places where all of these guys congregate. So in any event, to get back to Davis, he attended Harvard Law School in 1956, and then he began working for a law firm that represented CBS. And then they inquired when he was working as an attorney, as a young attorney, if he wanted to come and work for them as their in-house attorney. And he's like, yeah, and that was in 1965. And then by 1967, he becomes the president. He too had, let's say, a mentor, but we're not going to get into him today because I want to tell you so much. Time only permits. So, but I'm going to tell you, he's credited with discovering, among others, Janis Joplin, Carlos Santana, The Grateful Dead, Billy Joel, Aretha Franklin, Bruce Springsteen, Herbie Hancock, Rod Stewart, Prince, Aerosmith, Whitney Houston, God rest her soul, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Luther Vandross, Patti Smith, Alicia Keys, Usher, and many others. So at one point in an interview, Clive was asked that working in hip hop is a long way from, let's say, working with Barry Manilow. And so the question was, what was it like creating the hip hop label The Face back in 1989? And he is the best marketer. I mean, this guy knows every trick. So he said, I've always tried to supplement what I could do with the greater expertise of others. Knowing that R&B music was changing and that hip hop was arriving, I turned to LaFace, whose name is Kenneth Edmonds, to develop TLC and, the other one. And then, of course, he credits him for Usher and Pink. And then, are you aware that he is still going to host his pre-Grammy parties despite the raging fires in California?
No, I was not aware.
But doesn't it scream SATANI? Like doesn't, because Everybody else, almost all of the other people who have parties and companies, they said they will not have celebrations this year because of the fires. Clive Davis, who was 92 people, 92, he's like, no, the party is on, of course, because he is. I look at him and I see little horns coming out of his head, a little tail. But and guess who's going to be there? Jay-Z with his wife Beyonce. So yeah, he's going to have the party. So now, guys, in 1973, Davis is suddenly fired from CBS. William Paley has been pretty much put into the hot seat. He has to fire Clive Davis in 1973, although they're basically doing the same thing, and one hand washes the other. But he is fired along with another person that I'll name and some other people connected to the mafia for basically they claim it's improperly misappropriating funds to influence DJs into playing specifically Black music. The reason he wants to do this is to infiltrate the Black communities, right? Because you want every segment of the population to be able to control them through the use of music. And so the way that they were doing it is not dissimilar from the way it had been done 20 years earlier or 40 years earlier, but they discovered that Davis and others paid in the form of, let's say, substance and how do we call them? Entertainers of a very personal nature. How would we call that?
Adult entertainers?
Yes. Well, who do the deed.
Yeah, ladies of the night or men of the night?
Yes, these people and of all ages, okay, to provide them free of charge, clearly, because you want to do that, not just to the DJs, but also to the musicians. And why to the musicians? To keep them in line. Not just keep them in line because, let's say, you get somebody like Janis Joplin hooked on drugs, right? And then conveniently there's an overdose, right? But also